My name is Amy, and I need to put my story out into the world. I know most of you will probably just think this is made up and intended to scare you, but it is the whole truth, and I just need to get it off my chest. And even if there is just one person out there who believes me, perhaps even someone who has gone through something similar, then that will leave me at peace. Although I'll be at peace soon anyway. But, let's not jump ahead. Where else to start but at the beginning, right? This is my story, but it's also the story of me and Jeff. And Jeff's story is my story because I honestly can't remember life without him in it. So, to make it simple and short, we went to elementary school together. And after being friends for a few years, we finally became boyfriend and girlfriend. Of course, when you become an item in elementary school, it isn't really an item. It's just friendship. I think it started in the usual sort of silly way. Jeff told people he liked me, got someone else to tell me, and asked if I liked him back. At first I gave the standard, "Ew, boy, is disgusting" sort of response, but after the incessant teasing and the same back and forth with the "do you like him back" questioning, I finally gave in and I asked him to be my boyfriend. It's practically just a close friendship when you're that age, isn't it? You hold hands, okay, and you kiss, mostly on the cheek or perhaps a quick peck on the lips, but that's the extent of it. Oh, and we went on dates with our parents present, to the cinema and things like that. Childish romance, if you can even call it that. That usually never lasts beyond a few weeks, months at the most. Except me and Jeff did. The years kept flying by, and before we knew it, we were getting ready to go to high school. I know what you're thinking. Any relationship that by some miracle survived the whole way through elementary school can never make it through even the first few weeks of high school. And I'd agree with you. If me and Jeff had ever had any kids and my son or daughter got themselves a little partner, you certainly wouldn't expect it to last very long. And then they start high school, and of course their hormones run wild. So even if they do go to the same high school, they're bound to want to explore what else is out there. Your eyes are all over the place at that age, as soon as you're able to develop a sexual attraction to the opposite sex. So why would you want to stay in what is essentially a glorified friendship as a relationship? That I'm even having to convince you of this minuscule point doesn't bode well for the rest of the story, but I'm going to tell you anyway. The point is, this was all a lot of rambling just to say, me and Jeff made it through high school. We did have the luxury of going to the same school, but I think we'd have even made it through that. We were the exception to the rule. High school was awesome. People were jealous, just as lustful teens are bound to be, but we didn't realize. We were in our own little world. That was when we started kissing, and I mean real kissing. It was cool to learn together, because obviously we were already comfortable with one another by that point. There was no awkwardness or weirdness. It was wonderful. And obviously, as the years went by, we discovered sex, and that went pretty much the same way as the kissing. I'm not here to tell you a romance story or some erotica, so I'll leave it there. I just wanted you to have some sort of idea about how we grew together during our formative years. Well, throughout our entire lives, really. So, there we have it. Elementary school, check. High school, check. Next stop, college. I'm sorry to keep going on. This isn't just a life drama or a romance. I've told you that. I just really need you to understand everything. Besides, I am summing up most of my life in only a few paragraphs. Keep with me and you'll start to understand why I brought you here. Why I needed to share this thing with you. So, college. You get the picture by now. We survived it together. Me and Jeff. Even with all the partying and the hunky men and the pretty ladies, we never strayed from one another's side. I mean, looking is okay, isn't it? We both established that early on. It's only natural and human to be attracted to other people. Look at it this way. Over 7 billion people in the world, are you only ever going to have eyes for just one? Are you only ever going to have feelings for just one? Are you only ever going to love just one? The answer is no. It would be ridiculous to think such a way. The point is that you show love and respect to whatever partner you choose and remain dedicated to them. And me and Jeff did. The best part of it? We didn't even go to the same college. We didn't live together, none of that. It wasn't long distance. That would have been difficult, even for us. But we got through it again and came out together on the other side. No breakups, no cheating, barely any fighting. In fact, the worst it ever got was both of us getting frustrated and not seeing enough of one another. And that's not even a fight, really, is it? On that point, though, we did start looking for places as soon as we finished college, and the search didn't last very long. Places are so easy to come by these days, and people want to rent or sell fast. Naturally, having just come out of college, we were only in a position to rent. That was okay, though. We just wanted to be together, and if it took a while to save up, then so be it. We'd go from being together in a rented house to being together in a bought one. What was the difference? Material possessions don't define a relationship. On moving-in day, it was just the two of us, sorting everything out. We didn't really have much, and besides, we wanted to sort everything out ourselves. It felt right. And it was on that day, outside our new home, before we opened the door with our keys, that Jeff proposed to me. There wasn't anyone around to see and awkwardly walk past or offer an applause, but I preferred it that way. We'd always been trapped in our own little world, so it only made sense that all of the best and most significant moments we shared with one another should have been in private. A part of me, and a part of Jeff, I'm sure, considered just getting married with 2 witnesses, probably one from each side, and just do it that way. It would have been wonderful, but doing that would have also made a lot of people angry, hurt, and confused, namely our families, so that wasn't a real option. But it was nice to dream of. Of course, having just moved in together, and with all the expenses involved in that, this wasn't like a, we're gonna get married right away thing. It was more like a, we'll get married in a year or two when we're a bit more settled and have a bit more money saved, sort of thing. Boring, I know, but sensible. So anyway, we moved in and got settled, and it was the most amazing feeling in the world to finally have our own space together, away from friends, away from family, away from the whole world, it felt like. And that was always our thing, being in our own bubble. And of course, just as we as people evolve with age, so does a relationship. In school, we were in our own social bubble. In college, we were faithful and only had one another. Believe me, in college, that's as good as it gets. And now we had our own house, our own space. God, I'm rambling. I'm sure I don't have to explain all of this to you, do I? You've probably been through similar experiences and felt similar things. I'm sorry. I know you're not stupid. I just need you to understand. I could have started this story right in the middle, right where the action kicked in. But if I had done that, you wouldn't have had the full picture. I need you to understand that me and Jeff loved each other. He loved me, and I loved him. Whatever happens next is a mistake, and I wish every single day that I could take it back. Got it? So, something to explain. Like I said earlier on in this post, me and Jeff had an understanding about being attracted to other people, even about liking other people. It was just about being respectful enough to each other to never act on those feelings. Anyway, there was this place I went to with my lady friends every Friday night. Just this bar in the city center. A small place, never very busy, and that's why we liked it. We could sit around, have a couple drinks, and catch each other up on whatever drama had been happening during the week. Well, behind the bar there was this guy. How do I describe him? God, he just belonged in a modeling career, rather than serving people drinks from behind a bar. I'll put it that way. Tan skin, black hair, and piercing blue eyes, just to top it all off. He was always wearing tight black jeans and a t-shirt that always accentuated his features. Toned features, that is. Now, I know what you're thinking, and no, this isn't where the story is going. Well, maybe it is where it's going, but not in the way that you think. I even told Jeff about this guy and how in love with him me and all the girls were. That's just the kind of relationship me and Jeff had. And he would always tell me if there was a woman him and his friends had seen who was beautiful. And as was the case with my friendship group, many of Jeff's guy friends were single, so would always end up hooking up with these women. Naturally, a couple of my lady friends were single too, and always tried to flirt with this barman. and he was always polite and friendly, but never let it go beyond that. A lot of them wanted me to flirt with him, just to see if I could be the one to break him down. Now, another thing. Me and Jeff understood that flirting was fine, as long as it never went beyond that. Never put yourself in a position where something can happen. That was our rule. And if I was to flirt with this barman, who I saw every single week, and he responded in the same way, then I feared I would be putting myself in a situation that I did not want to be in. You see what I'm saying, right? Jesus, I'm rambling again. I'm sorry. This isn't just some lady drama or some 50 Shades rubbish, I promise you. If anything, this is a horror story. Plain and simple. Horror. I should mention that mine and Jeff's plans for the wedding picked up pretty quickly. Much quicker than we expected, because we were both in employment and had overestimated the impact of the house bills. We've been saving a lot, and so only 6 months into living in our new place, we were finally able to get plans for a wedding in place. We booked a venue, and a date most importantly, and got invites sent out for the following summer, and then got to work on other little things such as getting a caterer sorted out and a DJ, or perhaps a band if we found one we both liked. We didn't want a massive wedding anyway, just family and very close friends, so this wasn't going to cost us a fortune. So one night, me and my lady friends were at the bar, and they were ogling this barman as usual. I was pretty sure he'd become aware of when we were talking about him at this point, but the other ladies didn't seem to care. When they did their usual thing of getting on at me to go over and flirt with him. By this stage, literally every other woman in the group had tried and failed to break him down. I refused, as usual. Like I said, I didn't want to put myself in any sort of situation where I could be perceived or was actually being unfaithful to Jeff. That, and it was hilarious watching the desperation with which my friends really wanted me to try and be the one to break through to this handsome man. Look, one of them said, you're going to be married pretty soon. It's only a few weeks away. In the old times, you were never, official until you were married. Only when you were married were you supposed to remain faithful to each other. I thought this was the whole point of bachelor and bachelorette parties, she asked, and everyone else laughed, but was also nodding along, apparently believing that this crazy pitch might actually work on me. Bit archaic, don't you think? I said. Me and Jeff have been together since we were pretty much toddlers, and that's not even much of an exaggeration. I'm not going to throw everything away now just because... Okay, think of it this way, another friend interrupted. One man for your whole life. For the rest of your life. Don't you want to try something different? Just to make sure that Jeff is the one? Jeff is the one, I said simply. This back and forth went on for a while, until one of my friends delivered the killer pitch. The pitch that actually worked. The pitch that made me go over there to that barman and flirt away without so much as another protestation. What do you think they do on these men's drinking nights? One of my friends said. We're women. We sit around and talk about feelings and gossip and whatever else. Sure, we glossed over one barman dude, but that's the extent of it. Men act on those urges, believe me. I bet Jeff's had a similar conversation to this one with his friends, and being a man, he did it. I would have been offended, but pretty much every woman in attendance had been cheated on by a partner. No, I'd know. Men are better at lying than us, another friend said. Every other head of the table was nodding in agreement. That was it. Almost 20 years of building a bond, establishing trust, shattered by one argument from a group of friends. All those years at uni when we weren't together for extended periods of time, all these Friday nights with his male friends. I mean, I'd never done anything, but they were all right. Men were different, and their minds, their bodies, all of it worked differently in a way that we couldn't understand. So I went up to the bar and sat there while I ordered a drink. The barman was as smiley as ever, warm and welcoming, friendly. God, his eyes, so blue, so light, and in such contrast to the dark shade of his skin. They really stood out. They were all-consuming, intense, and it made me feel vulnerable. Somehow we got to talking. Probably just the usual small talk to start with. Me asking him how he came to work here, does he live locally, and him returning the same question to me. It turned out he did live locally, and, well, he was younger than I thought. He just worked the bar at weekends while he was at college. He was in his final year, thank God, so that put him at 20 or 21. And would you believe it? It turned out he was doing the same degree that I'd done. That's when we really hit it off, and before I knew it, I'd lost track of time, and my friends actually upped and left. I'd been at the bar for hours without even realizing it. Anyway, coming to my senses and not wanting to be left alone in what could quickly descend into a compromising situation, I left with my friends, but not before the barman gave me his number. A few days later, in the middle of the week, I texted him, and we hit it off in text too. As you can imagine, I didn't tell Jeff. It was probably the first thing I'd never told him. I didn't want to lie to him, and I didn't exactly know where this thing with the barman was going, but I couldn't get the thought out of my head that Jeff had done something behind my back. About 2 weeks later, a week before mine and Jeff's wedding, the barman told me he was free on the upcoming Friday. He'd got the day off work, and so I canceled the girls and just told them I wasn't feeling too well. Pre-wedding nerves, that sort of thing. Jeff always went straight to the pub from work on a Friday, so I didn't have to make any excuses to him. And when it came to the barman, well, I just invited him over. I told you this wasn't any sort of erotic nonsense, and it isn't, so I'll cut to the chase. He'd barely walked in the door when he gave me the look. And so we did it. It was fine, except it's true what they say. It's better with someone who knows you, and who you have a deep bond and connection with, rather than just some rando. And because of that, I felt myself thinking about Jeff the whole time. The whole time. We'd only just finished when the bedroom door opened, and Jeff walked in. In the climax, we obviously hadn't heard him come into the house, but what exactly had Jeff heard? I can't explain the emotions of that moment. Time just froze, stood still, as did all of us. I wasn't expecting Jeff home so early. Jeff wouldn't have even been expecting me to be here, let alone in our bed with another man. And that other man himself had no idea that I was taken. An absolute catastrophe all around. And I thought it was about to get even worse when Jeff came toward us. We were both naked, so it was not like we were in a rush to get out of bed and defend ourselves or even run off. We both just pulled the covers tighter around us and babbled incoherently at Jeff. But as it turns out, he wasn't coming for us. He reached into the top drawer of his bedside table, pulled out a small revolver, and shot himself in the head. Just like that. Blood everywhere. Brains everywhere. It felt like an eternity before me or the barman moved and finally called the police. They came, and, of course, I had to tell them the whole story. There were suspicious looks, wife-to-be found in bed with her new lover, and her husband just happens to shoot himself after having found them. You see it in the movies all the time, don't you? When the woman kills the meant-to-be husband so she can run off with the other man? That's not what happened here. And thankfully that quickly became clear to the police upon a more thorough inspection of the scene. The blood splatter patterns, fingerprints on the gun, all that stuff. Me and the barman had to give statements, and of course the story was in the paper a few days later. The whole story. All of it. I don't know how to... I'm sorry. I can't find the words. I can't go into it too much because I find it so difficult to talk about. But I wasn't even allowed to Jeff's funeral. His family wouldn't allow me. Can I really blame them? No, I can't. I deserved it. They never spoke to me again, and even my own family were cold with me. It felt like they were only supporting me out of duty. Even my own friends, yup, the very same group who had pushed me to do what I'd done, stopped talking to me. I didn't even make any effort with these people, and not because I didn't care about them. I did. Of course I did. But because I knew I deserved this. Well, in the case of my friends, what they did was pretty awful. They'd played their hand in this whole bloody mess, too. I tried to reach out to the barman, I guess just to apologize, but he didn't want to talk to me either. So I just isolated myself and confined myself to the house me and Jeff had lived in, which was a torturous experience all by itself. And that's it. That was my life. For 4 weeks, anyway. That was when the barman's face showed up in the newspaper. Suicide. The article talked about how he was clearly very deeply disturbed, but I'd never seen anything of the sort from what I knew of him. And even in the short time that we had known each other and talked to each other, he'd seemed perfectly sane to me. More than that, he was a charming young man who'd I'd risked and thrown everything away for. What could have possibly happened in the 4 weeks between our affair and him killing himself? Was it the guilt over Jeff? I read on. It talks about a suicide note, and obviously it can't reprint it, but the article describes how the barman had referenced the voice. Singular. Don't crazy people normally hear multiple voices? And yet here's the barman claiming that a voice drove him to kill himself. I called the police and asked to talk about it, to see if they could tell me anything about how he'd killed himself. Obviously they said they couldn't, and I was seconds away from telling them that I thought it might help them, but didn't. Who would believe me? It was suicide to them, plain and simple, and they wouldn't want it complicated. I even called the newspaper, thinking I might have more luck there. They'd clearly seen the suicide note and details on the case given what they'd written, but even they wouldn't tell me anything. Well, the person I spoke to said they wouldn't tell me anything unless I thought I could provide them with more information, and I considered telling them who I was, but I'd already suffered enough embarrassment over the whole thing. You might think me crazy, but it all made sense in my mind. You know how something just comes together like a light bulb moment? And deep down, even without the police or the newspaper telling me, I just knew that the barman had shot himself. So I couldn't say I was altogether too surprised when Jeff started paying me visits. Don't leave me now. We're nearly at the end. You've come this far, so you must be invested in the story, and every single word of what I've written is the truth, as hard as it has been at times. So please, please, keep reading. You may be tempted to close the tab and go back to whatever you were doing before you came across this, but I guarantee you this is 100% real. Google my name, search my local paper online, because I'll be in it before long. So here we go. Jeff's visits. Lipstick on the bathroom mirror at first. A drawing of a heart broken in two. The radio bursting to life at random moments, usually during the night, playing the song that me and Jeff had intended to be our first dance song. The sound of a man crying, echoing around the house, coming from nowhere and everywhere at the same time. I just felt a presence around the house, like eyes watching me. You know the feeling when you can feel someone's gaze burning into you? And there was just a coldness. I decided enough was enough. I had to settle this, and there was only one person to settle it with. That was Jeff. I went to the cemetery, straight to his grave, intending to talk to him. There were a lot of flowers there. Obviously, a lot of his friends and family were still paying him frequent visits. There were so many flowers that they covered the bottom half of his gravestone. I bent down and cleared the flowers out of the way to read it in its entirety. And there, underneath Jeff's name and date of birth and death, was my name, including my date of birth and an end date. Today's date. As in, the day I published this post on Reddit. Google me. You'll see it's the truth. Jeff wants me to be with him. I can feel it. He's punished me enough, and now we can be together in the afterlife, and I can try to explain everything to him. Unless I don't end up where he is. Unless I end up in the bad place. But the truth is, I just can't go on anymore. I built up this life, and then I tore it down with one stupid mistake. With one stupid action, being influenced by other people for perhaps the first time in my life. What's the point of going on? Why start all over again? Jeff has always been faithful to me. I know that now, and shouldn't have had to put him through what I did in order to find that out. So I'll give him what he wants. Just like the barman gave him what he wanted. There's just one thing I haven't figured out. The barman said he'd heard the voice. I haven't yet. Nor do I think I will. Weird, isn't it? You know you've messed up when even the dead don't want to talk to you. I understand some, if not most, won't believe me, and to be honest, if someone told me this, I would be skeptical too. I wrote down everything beforehand just to compose my thoughts, so if it sounds like I'm reading some sort of scary story, I guess it's because I am. Alright. All or nothing. Here we are, on the way to the big camping trip that we've all been looking forward to for months. Well, I say big. The school's only taken out 2 small groups to camp in the mountains on the outskirts of the city, just past the woodlands. Affectionately known as the Camel Mountains by all the locals because, in truth, there's only 2 of them. And I'm not entirely sure if they're big enough to qualify as mountains. Perhaps they're more like big hills. I don't know, what's the difference? You get the picture anyway. So, the idea is one group camps on one mountain, another group on the other, and we can get together over the next few days to undertake some activities that the teachers and mountain people, as I've come to know them, I don't actually know what their job is, have planned for us. There's 5 students in each group, and then 2 members of staff, a teacher and a mountain person. And we're both on separate minibuses that are going to take us to the car park at the foot of the mountains, when we'll then be going our separate ways. I'll tell you what I'm most excited for when it comes to this trip. Nighttime. No doubt we're going to do the traditional gather around the campfire, tell scary stories to each other before we get off to bed in our tents. That's what I'm looking forward to. You can't beat it, am I right? I even brought a bag of marshmallows so we can toast them. Ellie? I turned to my friend Danielle, shaking my thoughts of the nights from my head. In a world of your own? She asks, smiling. I nod. Yeah. I laugh a little, thinking about the marshmallows later. You didn't tell me you brought snacks. She reaches underneath my seat for my backpack, unzips it, and starts to rummage around inside. I didn't, I reply, letting her go through the bag to discover it all by herself anyway. Well, just those. What's going on? Our other friend, Isabel, poked her head through the gap in between mine and Danielle's seats. Ellie brought snacks and didn't say anything, she said, putting the backpack underneath the seats again. I roll my eyes. I brought a bag of marshmallows in the highly likely event that we have a campfire. That's all. Oh, Isabel said, disappointed and disappearing from view for a moment. I brought more than that. Her voice came through the gap, quickly followed by her hands, which were holding 2 small bags of sweets. One for me and one for Danielle. Yes, thank you! Danielle excitedly exclaimed. We sat there in our trio, munching on our bag of sweets and talking about all the school drama and gossip we had, which wasn't very much as of late. Just some girl drama, friends falling out and then making up, and, of course, all 3 of us had guys that we liked. The standard stuff, nothing fancy. In just over an hour, we'd reached the foot of the mountains, and seeing them up close for the first time in years made me reconsider my earlier thoughts. These were mountains, surely. They were huge, blocking out most of the sky. Thankfully, they looked easy enough to climb. They weren't very steep, and paths have been man-made for groups like ours to make their way up. Us 5 girls and our 2 members of staff, also female, made our way out of the minibus, gathering our belongings and forming into a semicircle, continuing to talk to each other. The other minibus also cleared itself of its passengers. The same amount of people as ours, but they were all male, and some of the boys did a sort of shimmy over to us and broke into the circle to start talking. One of the guys, Tom, was the guy I liked, because, Of course, life is never simple and was always throwing in these little things like, yeah, you're going on this fun camping trip, but guess what? The guy you've been obsessing over for the past year is going to be right there with you. Fun, right? Well, no, not fun at all. I never considered myself a girly girl, and yet, when he was around, I could feel myself clam up and become awkward, as though all of my muscles had tightened, which restricted blood flow to my brain and made me instantly into some sort of dumb, almost mute person, unable to speak coherently or even like a human being. I turned instantly to Danielle, trying to block out that he's there and start talking to her. She cocks her eyebrows at me, because she knows, as does Isabel, and all I can think is, please, please, God, don't give me away. Just play along for God's sake. She does, thankfully. One of these days, though, the teasing is going to go too far and give me away. I can just feel it. And then what? Tom is always quite friendly with me, even though I do turn into a shell of myself when he's nearby. But if he knew the way I felt, would he still treat me the same after that? Would he even talk to me anymore? Right then, our teacher, Miss Henderson, said, approaching the circle, "Boys, if you could make your way back to your group, please. And try not to be too upset. You will get to see the girls again quite a few times over the next few days." The boys all turned around as though scolded dogs with their tails between their legs and slowly retreated back to their minibus where their teacher was waiting. Mr. Bradley was a large man, both in height and width. He was the school sports teacher after all, but he looked like he should be the star of an action film rather than a school teacher. The girls all idolized him, and the boys wanted to be him. In that way, he was a star, at least, if only a local one. Tom, though, didn't head back with the other boys. He lingered for a moment, and my gaze happened upon him. As soon as it did, I regretted it, and panicked, and wanted to look away. But he was looking at me too, so I couldn't. I looked for a moment, heart hammering in my chest, and then watched as though I was not occupying my own body as he smiled at me. Automatically, I smiled back, and then he turned around and went back to his group. Danielle nudged me, and I turned to her. Her eyebrows were cocked again, and Isabella was biting her lip in an "oh my god, did that just happen?" sort of way. I rolled my eyes at both of them and looked away, but felt myself blushing slightly. With both groups separated again after a gathering that lasted mere minutes, both teachers give instructions to their groups and then hand over to the mountain people, who run through a few safety, things before going on to list the itinerary of the next couple of days. Right then, the mountain woman clapped her hands and turned to look at the two mountains that did look an awful lot like two gargantuan camel humps. "It's time to ascend!" With that, we all gather up our things and begin the trek up the mountain, the boys doing the same up the other one, before our view of one another's group was obscured by the maze of trees that we disappeared into. "No signal up here," Isabel said, pouting at her phone. "We did say there would be no point in bringing your phone, girls," Miss Henderson said. "Come on." She gestured towards the campfire that we had set up earlier in the afternoon, after going out to find twigs and other kindling for it. "Let's forget the technology of the modern world and enjoy nature and real-life human interaction," she finished. "My mom is going to be worried," Isabel huffed. Miss Henderson looked as though she was holding in a huff herself. "All of your parents were informed about being out of range in the letters we sent out," she said before turning away so that Isabel couldn't retort. We were all sat cross-legged around the fire, and my bag of marshmallows was placed next to it so that everyone can help themselves. I leaned in close to Danielle and whispered, "So, if this is about your boyfriend again, I don't want to know," she said, but laughed a little after she'd said it. "He's not my boyfriend," I said a little too loudly, causing everyone to turn and look. "Not yet," Danielle whispered and nudged me. Miss Henderson brought us all to attention by clapping her hands together again. "Right then, ladies," she said, rubbing her hands together and smiling. "Story time," she announced, and a couple of us made ghostly sounds or uttered fake cries of terror. This was the real fun part of the day. So far, all we done was set up tents, which actually wasn't as easy as it sounds, but there we are. Gathered twigs to make a campfire, the mountain lady showing us how to light it without using a lighter or a match, and the mountain lady had also taken us through some things like tying rope and all the different knots you can make. Miss Henderson set us off by telling the classic urban legend story, the one about the hook on the car door handle, except she added in a plot twist by combining it with another common scary campfire story, that the hookman was also in the back seat. That one caught us all by surprise, as obvious as it should have been, and the tone was set. A couple of the other girls went next. One came up with an original ghost story set in a forest that was okay, whilst Isabel opted for the tried and tested, as Miss Henderson had, and told the "Aren't you glad you didn't turn on the lights" story. A short and snappy tale. Danielle volunteered next, and she cleared her throat dramatically and sat up straight. "So," she began, after pausing for effect, "there is something—" She paused again, her head twisting as an owl's would, looking behind her in the trees. "Oh, a live-action performance!" Isabel mocked, and laughed as everyone else did, but Danielle was still looking around, squinting and trying to see inside the trees that surrounded our clearing, where we had spent the afternoon setting the tents and the campfire up. "Danielle?" I tried, and then Miss Henderson also seemed to notice something was wrong, turning to the mountain lady, who shrugged and said that there wasn't much wildlife inside the trees outside of birds and deer. Nothing life-threatening, for sure. Studies have been carried out time after time, covering both mountains in their entirety. She was dead certain, she said, although after the third time of saying so, it was as though she was trying to convince herself. Finally, Danielle turned to look back at us. "Did none of you hear that?" she asked, and as though in answer to her question, the momentary silence was upended when Miss Henderson uttered a shrill cry. She was levitating. All of us watched in horror. A couple of girls making their way onto their feet, and all of us backing off, shuffling along the hard ground from a seated position. Very quickly, my eyes adjusted, and the small fire helped a little, because now Miss Henderson was moving forwards, and she wasn't levitating. The thing that had hoisted her up was illuminated by the orange flames of the fire. The beastly humanoid had to be at least 7 feet tall, probably even more than that. It was bulky and covered in thick, long black hair. Its face was lumpy, a sort of snout, 2 shiny black eyes, and a mouth that parted to reveal teeth as big and sharp as kitchen knives. The meaty paw that held on to Miss Henderson covered her entire abdomen, only her head and legs were visible. She continued to scream and squirm when the ape-like monstrosity put her head into its mouth and bit it off, as though eating a chicken drumstick. Everyone screamed, and the mountain woman, whose name I hadn't bothered to remember, cried for all of us to run, before the behemoth swatted her aside. It looked effortless, but she flew far, all the way into the trees, and there was a grisly splat that emphasized her landing. By the time I looked back to the campsite, after trying to track where the mountain woman had landed, the beast had already flattened or tore apart 2 of the other girls, and was now feasting on the remains. I felt myself being tugged, and before I knew it, I was inside the trees, under the cover of darkness, with Danielle and Isabel. What the hell was that? But I heard my own voice, as though it was far away, as though someone else and not me had spoken. We all listened and heard the monster, the Bigfoot, my mind told me, skulking around, sniffing and breathing heavy, each grunt coming out as a guttural growl. It was a long time before any of us moved, and much longer before any one of us spoke again. When we were far enough into the trees and looking to begin our descent down the side of the mountain we had only a few hours ago climbed up, I was the first to finally speak and said, "We need to get the boys." I was thinking that surely Mr. Bradley could help us, just like in those action movies that he should be starring in. He'd battle the beast, come out on top, and get us all out of here. More than anything, though, I felt myself wondering if I was ever going to see Tom again, and that I had to know if he felt what I felt if we were all going to die up here on these hump-like mountains. "I think we should go back," Isabel said, shaking her head. "I need my phone." "There's no signal out here," Danielle retorted. "Well, I still think camp would be the safest place. God knows where we are out here, or even what is out here for that matter." "We just need to find the path," I said, looking at the floor and hoping that we were going to step out of the trees and onto a clear path at any moment. "And we know what's out here," Danielle added quietly. "Don't know where, then," Isabel muttered. But she wasn't done unpacking the events of the campsite massacre, because she asked us, "What was that thing?" This was a question I'd asked myself many minutes ago, and had received no response. But it was just as well. That was about the only thing I could have said at the time. I doubt I would have registered anyone's response, but apparently the other girls were in an even worse state than me, unable to even offer any sort of answer. "A Bigfoot," I said simply. The other 2 girls stopped walking, so I stopped with them. "What?" Isabel asked, but then continued. There's no such thing. Don't be so a Bigfoot, I said. Of course there are such things. All these sightings and stories over the years just for something not to be true? They're animals, sure, not mythical beings. Evolved apes or whatever, and that makes them clever and dangerous. They hide themselves well, and for that one to attack us the way it did, it must be desperate. Hungry. Isabel and Danielle shared a look before returning their gaze to me. Since when have you been an expert on urban legends? Storytime ended when... Danielle trailed off. It's not an urban legend, I said a little too loudly, and we all looked around, silent for a few moments before looking back to each other when we were satisfied that it was safe and that nothing had hurt us. When I spoke again, my voice returned to a whisper. These animals exist. They are real. I'm telling you. Okay then, Danielle replied. Who made you such a weirdo wildlife expert? Of course I read up on this stuff, I say as though it's obvious. You guys know how excited I was for this trip. I love that sort of stuff. Both of them shared a look again, and when they looked back to me, Isabel sighed. Although it appeared it was more to expel the tension that she had set into her body than out of any sort of annoyance. Fine, she said, nodding her head. Then you can lead us out of this, right? I stared at her, and my mind started to register just how unreal all of this was, how much like a dream it felt. I don't know why it seemed to be taking so long for me, for all three of us, to process what was happening, but no doubt part of it was just how suddenly everything had happened. One moment we thought Danielle was telling a scary story, and the next, 4 of our group were dead, horrifically mutilated by a beastly monster. One that was hungry and more than happy to satiate its desire by feasting on human flesh. I shuddered. Danielle. I tried, and had to clear my throat before I could speak again. When you were supposed to be telling your story, and instead you said you could hear something, or you asked us if we could hear something, what was it that caught your attention? Danielle considered this for a moment, and then looked at the floor, her eyes wide and far away, unseeing. They were reliving the horrors of what had happened at the campsite. It was just footsteps, she said. But then there was a breathing as well, like it was right behind me. And then it started to move, like something was moving quickly through the trees, circling us, and the next thing I knew, Miss Henderson. As though triggered into life again by what she was saying, there was a sudden snapping of a twig somewhere in the distance, followed by a few grunts, as though something, and we all knew what something, was trying to sniff us out. We all looked at each other, and then all around us, as though frantically trying to search for the answer of what we should do now. I grabbed Danielle and pulled her close to me, taking the lead just as Isabel said I should. I pointed to the floor, which held dead leaves, twigs, and small pebbles and stones among other things, and then I rubbed my 2 hands together, and Danielle seemed to catch on pretty quickly. Next, I turned to Isabel, who I'd noticed was still wearing her backpack. This was nothing out of the ordinary, though. She always had it on, and often with nothing inside. And on this occasion, I was certain there would definitely be nothing inside, because we'd all unpacked earlier that day. I asked her what was inside it anyway, by pointing to it and motioning for her to open it. She shrugged it off her back and brought it around her front slowly, unzipping it as quietly as she could. I looked at the contents and she shrugged as though to say, sorry, I didn't bring anything useful. But she had brought something useful. Isabel probably thought I was hoping she'd have a weapon in her bag, but I wasn't, because what sort of weapon would even have an effect on an animal like the one we were facing? Isabel had in her bag the length of rope that she had been given earlier when they were all learning how to tie different knots. Most people had simply thrown theirs inside their tents or discarded them somewhere around the campsite, but good old Isabel had put it inside her backpack. Now I had something I could work with. I didn't think there was any way we could kill or even stop this monster, but we could at least slow it down, perhaps throw it off our scent. While Danielle set to work on finding 2 twigs to set alight, I moved over to 2 large trees with Isabel, making her take the rope out of her bag. The 2 large trees were about 5 meters apart. They were like an entryway themselves, and I guessed that these were old, whereas the rest of the trees were planted or something. But why would that be necessary? It was like the woodland, the mountain, had needed to go through a regeneration for some reason. I decided not to worry about it too much right there and then, and I stretched the length of rope to one tree, while Isabel stretched to the other, after I directed her to it by pointing. I started to run the rope around my tree. The rope was thin, but it was long, so there was enough length for me to wrap it around the tree one whole time before I started to tie it, and at the same time, Isabel was watching and copying me. I held up a hand just before she tightened her knot, and kept my own loose. I motioned for us to lower the rope. Just as we started doing this, we froze because those footsteps were back, and they were very, very close. And this time, it wasn't just the footsteps. It was the breathing. The guttural grunting, the growl. Because it was close now. Somewhere inside the shadows, immediately around them. The darkness itself allowed this beast to camouflage itself. From the quick glance I'd caught of it, its fur was completely black and thick so that no skin was visible, which meant that the darkness was its friend. The only hope we'd have of seeing it, although no doubt we'd hear it first, would be if its mouth was open, and the little moon and starlight that there was revealing the knife-like, razor-shiny teeth that were contained within. I felt Isabel shaking from the way the rope was vibrating on my end, and going up and down like small waves in the middle. We left the rope about a foot off the ground, and then I gave the nod for us to tie. I managed to tie my end in the strongest knot that the mountain lady had shown us earlier. It was complex, but my fingers worked fast, and besides, I'd read about it anyway in all of the geographical magazines I'd collected. It was true. I'd never told Isabel or Danielle about my obsession with the natural world. I don't know why. I guess I felt like they'd judge me, but it certainly has built me up to be in a position to deal with the monstrosity that the natural world has spat out at us right now. By the time I'd finished, the beast stomping was now in close proximity, and I estimated it would probably be a minute or likely even less before he was upon us. No doubt his nose worked quickly, even if his eyes didn't. Isabel was still fumbling with her end of the rope, so I scuttled over to her and finished it off for her, again using the strong knot that had been demonstrated for us earlier in the day. Isabel retreated further back to Danielle, and when I turned to look at them both, I was impressed by what I saw. Danielle had been working hard on her own task, while me and Isabel tied the rope around the tree trunks, and somehow managed to light 3 huge thick branches. Danielle was holding 2, and Isabel was holding another that looked like it had just been freshly lighted, probably using one of the flames from Danielle's torches. Going towards them, Danielle handed me one and whispered, "What do we do now, Ellie?" I looked at her for a moment, feeling the presence of the beast as it stopped walking, its eyes no doubt on us. In fact, I just knew its eyes were on us. You know that feeling you get when you know someone is staring deep into you? As though they have a laser vision and you can just feel their intense gaze penetrating your skin. "Just follow my lead," I stated, my voice at a normal conversational tone, because there was no point in trying to hide ourselves anymore. I turned around, strangely confident, although I could feel the hesitation, hell, the downright sheer terror, coming from my friend behind me, and saw the humongous figure skulking towards us, perfectly positioned in between those 2 trees that had the rope tied around them. I went forwards, almost right up to the rope, holding the flaming torch aloft above my head. "Come on!" I cried, and saw the monster cock its head. It was so tall, taller than I'd remembered, even though that had only been surely less than an hour ago, and I started to think that we'd made a terrible, fatal mistake. Nothing was going to stop this animal. Not flaming torches, not some stupid rope wrapped around some trees, nothing. It started to come forwards, and I felt Isabel and Danielle join me despite their fear. The combined light of our torches illuminated the killer creature once more, and upon closer inspection, I saw that I actually could see beneath its fur as it blew slightly in the wind. However, it looked more like armor. Shiny, black, thick, padded, heavy. Even bullets wouldn't stop this gargantuan monster. God knows what it would take. But I'd expected this anyway. All we had to do was divert it for long enough to try and get away. The monster was close now, and so just to test its reaction, I waved my flaming torch, and it hesitated slightly, one of its feet retreating and stepping backwards. I stepped back now that I knew what I needed, and the monster resumed its advance. "Come on," I whispered. The beast uttered a growl that seemed to shake the very earth itself, and just before it turned into a roar, the animal was suddenly falling, its feet scrambling to find balance and failing. The crash that followed did shake the earth, as though an earthquake had hit the mountains. The beast cried out a howl of pain and scrambled to get to its feet, but the rope had twisted itself around one of the monster's feet, and one of the old trees seemed to be arching itself as though ready to collapse. "Quickly!" I shouted, running around the monster, which was struggling to climb to its feet, giving it a wide berth. Standing beneath one of the old trees, I held my flaming torch underneath one of its branches, setting it on fire, and then did the same with a few others as Danielle and Isabel followed my lead, working on the other old trees as well as many of the others surrounding us. "Keep your torches!" I shouted over the crackling of the flames and the desperate whines of the monster. "Let's go! Now!" We ran around the beast again, which clutched the rope around its foot in one of its mighty paws and started to tug. It didn't realize that it was pulling the tree it was attached to down, and it was going to land on top of him, flames and all. As much as I wanted to stay and watch, I couldn't. We had to get away. The last thing I saw was the monster, encircled by flames and about to be crushed as a result of its own foolish actions, stemming from a simple, animalistic mind. The three of us fled, quickly at first and eventually slowing down. The woodland continued to flame behind us as we made our descent down the mountain. The smoke was thick in the air, and the crackling sound followed us all the way down. It wasn't long before helicopters came, and police sirens rang out. When we got to the bottom of the mountain, to the car park, there were already police waiting for us, asking to know what happened. We told them, in a jumbled and panicked way, and they shared looks before making a few phone calls. Sat in the back seat of one of their cars with the doors open, the sun rising in the distance. I told one of them that there was also a boys' camp up on the other mountain. I found it strange they hadn't come down too after having seen the flames. He thanked me and passed the message on in another hushed phone call. The flames were soon put out by red helicopters that carried water cannons, and shortly after that, black cars started to arrive. Men in black suits exited and, without talking to anyone, made their way up the mountains in two groups. Just under an hour later, the group that had gone up on the left side, where our girls' camp had been staying, came down carrying something enormous wrapped in a white sheet. I breathed a sigh of relief knowing that it was dead, but felt the same terror I had in the night at seeing its massive size again. Even in the sheet, and even lying down very much dead, the beast dwarfed these men that were carrying it. They put it into the back of a large black van and swiftly drove off with it. I wonder what the newspaper is going to say tomorrow, I thought to myself. It certainly won't be telling the whole story. Probably won't give any sort of detail as to what happened. That's if these black-suited men get their way. I know who they are. I read enough stuff online. Government officials, secret ones. The same ones who cover up all the Area 51 stuff. It was another hour later, and by this point ambulances had arrived and were checking the three of us over, before the black suits came down from the mountain on the right. I'd expected them to be followed by the male group who had come camping with us, but instead, they'd come down with something else. More white sheets. Blood-stained. It was a long time before I stopped screaming. So that's my story. I'm not going to read the comments, but thank you to anyone who's listened this far. And please, stay safe out there.